Yes, sir. The claims surrounding Kodak Black and Johnny Dang have set the internet on fire, with people pointing to a jewelry deal gone wrong as the spark behind a confrontation.
Central America thing. So what's your skills on for real, Johnny Dang? You Vietnam?
Vietnamese, yeah.
Vietnamese.
Original, baby.
So that ain't like that ain't Korea.
No,
That's different from all that. Huh?
different. Chinese,
Oh, okay.
Vietnamese.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll see a Mexican.
That allegedly led to an arrest. What gets said online and what the actual record shows are two different things. And the gap between the two is where the real story lives. Here is the Kodak Black and Johnny Dang story. The grill that broke the internet. Johnny Dang is a jeweler based in Houston, Texas. His store, Johnny Dang & Coy's, has sat at the center of hip-hop's jewelry culture since the early 2000s. Born in Vietnam, he came to the United States and built a business that put his name in the mouths of some of the biggest artists in the country, Central America. So what you're going through, you Vietnam. Vietnamese. Yeah, Vietnamese. Original, baby. So that ain't like that ain't Korea. No, that's different from all that. Huh? Different Chinese. Yeah. Sometimes you'll see a Mexican. His specialty is grills, custom-fitted dental jewelry, and has made them for some of the most recognizable names in rap music. His clients have flown in from across the country. Some fly in on private jets. Dang has built his name on the back of artists who use jewelry to tell the world where they have arrived. Kodak Black, born Bilkahan Capri, is a rapper from Pompano Beach, Florida. He grew up in the Golden Acres housing projects and turned to music at an early age, building his name through a series of mixtapes before signing to Atlantic Records in 2015. By the time he became a regular client at Johnny Dang's store, he was already a multi-platinum artist with songs like Tunnel Vision and ZZ behind him and a track record of spending real money on real jewelry. There are multiple documented instances of Kodak visiting the store, receiving deliveries, and showing off pieces from Dang publicly. He flew in from Florida for purchases. Dang personally delivered pieces on other occasions, in vlogs posted to Dang's own YouTube channel. Kodak moved to the store with the ease of a man who knew the layout. Relaxed, talkative, joking around, treating it like familiar ground. He talked about his struggles on camera. He talked about his teeth. He talked about his life. I got my boy in the building. I got a lot of jewelry here, a lot of watches here. This look, at some point in 2024, Kodak commissioned one of the more ambitious pieces of his career from Dang's store, a custom multicolored diamond grill, commonly called the Skittles Grill, named for the way its rainbow-colored stones were arranged. The piece carried a price tag of $50,000. Kodak had been building toward it openly, hyping the project in vlogs and clips alongside Dang, calling the stones candy, showing the early setup off on a private jet and during studio sessions. This was not a casual purchase. It was a statement, the kind of piece that announces a version of yourself to every room you enter. Then came the Instagram Live, in a session that spread across TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. In the months that followed, Kodak removed the grill on camera in real time. He said they were too big. He said they were too flashy. He said they did not fit his vibe anymore. He said he was going back to simpler gold options from his contacts back in Broward County. He laughed at one point. The overall register of the live was casual, almost bored, but the clip moved fast anyway. It landed on rap pages, in jewelry forums, and in the comment sections of content creators who have been watching the broader hip-hop jewelry space for months. Comments filled with people asking versions of the same question. What happened between Kodak and Johnny Dang? At the same time, on a separate track, a story was forming in Houston that had nothing to do with Kodak and its origins, but would eventually pull his name into it to the same industry connections that had tied him to Dang in the first place. A longtime client of Dang's had gone public with accusations that would challenge the reputation of one of the most well-known jewelers in the culture. As those accusations grew, so did the names being attached to them, including Kodak's. By the time those claims escalated to the level of arrested for destroying the store, they had traveled a long distance from whatever events actually started them. What that journey looked like and how Kodak's name ended up embedded in it starts with understanding what jewelry has always represented for him. Because that context is everything. I got the lyric, It said, "I changed my life tonight if Donald Trump reduced my sentence." He not only reduces, he pardoned you. Ah, that good. This is a man for whom what he wears is inseparable from who he is. And to understand why a grill story could catch the kind of fire it did, you have to understand where that connection came from. Ice identity and the come-up story. To understand why a grill controversy could spiral into an internet firestorm attached to Kodak Black's name, you have to go back to a housing project in Pompano Beach, Florida, and a child who had nothing. The Golden Acres projects were not the kind of place that prepared you for wealth. They were the kind of place that made you dream about it in specific sensory terms. What it would feel like, what it would look like on your wrist, in your mouth, around your neck. For Kodak Black, the moment money arrived was the moment jewelry became a language, and he has been speaking that language loud ever since. His full jewelry collection has been estimated at well over $2 million in total value. A number that stacked against his origins tells a story more efficiently than almost anything he could put in a rap verse. His signature style leans heavily into custom iced-out designs, pieces that are not just expensive, but narrative-built, to carry meaning alongside their price tags. Every skull, every stone, every chain is a physical version of a chapter in his life, turned into metal and carbon and worn on his body like a biography. Among his most discussed pieces is a 7-inch skull pendant decked out with Viking horns, emerald stones across the eye sockets, and enough intricate stonework to qualify as sculpture. The piece sits on a kilo chain and reportedly comes with 8 custom charms, each representing a distinct phase of his life. His crew, his legal battles, his incarceration, his comeback, his freedom. He reportedly paid $800,000 cash for this piece from Highmark Jewelers, a figure that, even by the already extravagant standards of hip-hop jewelry culture, made jaws drop across the industry. Jewelers and collectors cited it as one of the most elaborate custom commissions in recent memory. This is not the behavior of a man who views jewelry as decoration. This is the behavior of a man who views it as documentation. In 2021, he walked into Icebox Diamonds in Atlanta with his sniper gang entourage and spent $180,000 in a single visit. He tipped the salesperson $3,000. He did not negotiate the price. He did not hesitate over the selections. He moved through the store with the confident, unhurried energy of someone who had spent a long time imagining exactly the scenario and who understood on some level that the act of spending was itself the point. This is what coming up from nothing looks like when you suddenly have everything. His relationship with Johnny Dang extended naturally from this worldview. Dang had been a go-to for rap artists since the early 2000s. His Houston store, functioning as something between a high-end boutique and a pilgrimage destination for artists who wanted custom dental jewelry built to the most exacting specifications. Kodak had reportedly commissioned pieces from Dang valued at up to $100,000 in a single order. Permanent, flawless grills that sat in his mouth as visible proof of how far he had traveled from Pompano Beach. The Skittles grill was supposed to be the next elevation of that story. It was built around multicolored diamonds arranged in a pattern that evoked the rainbow-colored candy, vibrant, theatrical, the kind of piece that transforms a smile into an event. Kodak had been publicly enthusiastic about the design during the months it was being made, talking about it in the same breathless, forward-leaning way he talked about his best music. He called the stones candy. He showed the in-progress work off like a reveal. The finished grill was later described as bulky, uncomfortable, and unusable, not by anyone else, but by Kodak himself on the Instagram Live that began its viral journey shortly after delivery. He took out on camera. He said it was not him anymore. He said the flashy, oversized look did not match where his head was at. He said he was going back to gold slugs from people he knew back in Broward. The whole exchange lasted a few minutes. The tone was almost amused, a man correcting a mistake rather than lodging complaint. But the clip was not consumed in isolation. It was consumed inside a moment where a much larger argument about Johnny Dang's diamonds was already building heat. And once that argument erupted in full, the grill clip was going to be reread by hundreds of thousands of people who were no longer thinking about fit and style. They were thinking about fraud. Kodak's history with jewelry had always been about proving something, about showing distance traveled. The cruelest irony of the coming controversy was that the piece designed to celebrate that distance would end up being used as ammunition in a war he had never actually agreed to fight, the Sauce Wall eruption and the fake diamond scandal. Long before Kodak Black's name entered the wider controversy, the tension inside Houston's rap and jewelry community had been building at a slow burn for years. It was not born in a single bad transaction or a public confrontation. It was something slower, a pressure that had been accumulating in private conversations between artists and their teams and quiet questions about whether the stones being placed in custom pieces were exactly what the receipts said they were. The man who finally brought that pressure to a public boiling point was Sauce Walla, a Houston rapper whose connection to Johnny Dang was not a celebrity endorsement or a one-time purchase. It was a relationship spanning more than 20 years, rooted in the specific loyalty of a local artist who had supported a local jeweler from the beginning, long before the out-of-town money arrived and a national profile grew. That depth of history made what S.W. Walker did next one of the most impactful moves in the story. In early 2026, Sauce Walker went public with accusations that sliced directly at the foundation of Johnny Dang's business. He claimed on camera and without hedging that Johnny Dang had been selling lab-grown CVD diamonds, synthetic stones produced in controlled environments and valued at a fraction of what natural diamonds command, to clients who were paying natural VVS prices. He alleged that the overcharging was systematic. He alleged that local artists, the ones who had put in years of loyalty from the Houston community, were being treated as second-tier customers compared to the celebrity clientele flying in from Los Angeles and New York and Miami. And then in a kind of symbolic act that hip-hop reserved for its most definitive breaks, Saswaka removed his Johnny Dang pieces on camera and announced he was switching to a different jeweler entirely, a former Dang employee known as Plug Geo, who had reportedly constructed a $1 million permanent grill for Sauce as the most expensive possible statement of where those loyalties now lived. The move hit Dang's brand the way an earthquake hits a building that has never been tested suddenly and from a direction that the structure was not designed to absorb. The social media response was immediate and exponential. Within days of S. Walla's public statements, content creators across every major platform were taking the story apart and reassembling it into their own versions, each iteration amplified, each one adding layers that the original accusations had never actually included. Some posts claimed that Johnny Dang's Houston store had been raided by the FBI over fraud complaints filed by multiple artists. Others claimed that federal agents had seized inventory and records. The alleged financial figures attached to fraud grew with each retelling, and names were attached to the story with varying degrees of connection to the events being described. Claims circulated that artists were owed millions, that balances including figures like $7 million in unpaid debts between Dang and his clients were part of a broader legal exposure, and that names including Sean Kingston and Rich the Kid were connected to the fallout. Each wave of content pulled more names into the orbit of the story regardless of whether those individuals had said anything, done anything, or had any documented grievance against Johnny Dang. Kodak Black's name arrived in this pile through the grill clip, the recording from late 2024. Kodak on Instagram Live, removing the Skittles peace sighting style, and Fit was now being recut and reposted with entirely new framing. What had circulated as a casual moment of a man changing his mind about a piece of jewelry was now being presented as Kodak exposing the jeweler confronting a fraud or reacting to the same diamond deception that Saswaka had described. The original context was stripped away. The distinction between this grill is too bulky and this jeweler sold me fake diamonds was collapsed into a single narrative arc that the raw footage had never supported. Johnny Dang responded directly to the wave of accusations, addressing the fraud allegations and the store raid rumors in real time on his own platforms. He called the raid story fake news. He described the surrounding content as AI, enhanced disinformation being engineered for clicks and views. He called out the fabricated allegations specifically and told anyone mentioning his name to attach some respect to it. His team issued additional clarifications. He acknowledged that unpaid balances from various artists were a genuine and separate issue, but drew a clear line between those business disputes and the question of diamond authenticity that Sauce Walker had raised. What the response made plain was that the story, by the time it reached its viral peak in March and April of 2026, had achieved a velocity almost entirely disconnected from the specific verifiable events that had set it in motion. The claim that Kodak Black had been arrested for destroying the store was just one thread in the web of fabricated drama that had grown too fast and traveled too far for any single correction to contain. But the question of what Kodak Black actually does and does not have in his legal record is not ambiguous. That record exists. It has been reported on extensively, confirmed in court documents, and published across credible outlets for years. And it tells a very specific story about the kinds of places and circumstances that have put Kodak's name in a police report, the arrest record that actually exists. Kodak Black's history with law enforcement is one of the most thoroughly documented legal timelines in modern hip-hop. It spans nearly a decade of formal arrests, court proceedings, plea deals, prison sentences, and supervised release violations that have played out in courtrooms across South Florida and in federal facilities across the state. It is not a mystery, and it is not a rumor. It is a matter of documented public record. The arrest that first defined his public image beyond his music came in January 2018. Officers from the Broward Sheriff's Office raided his home in Pembroke Pines after an Instagram live session captured him and others handling marijuana and at least one handgun in the presence of his young son. The session had been watched live by thousands of people, and authorities were alerted to it in real time. When deputies arrived, they booked him on 7 felony charges: grand theft of a firearm, 2 counts of possession of a weapon by a convicted felon, possession of cannabis over 20 grams, child neglect, and 2 probation violations, tied to an earlier case. His legal team moved immediately, and by February, 3 charges had been dismissed for insufficient evidence. In April, he was sentenced to 364 days in prison for the remaining charges. He was out by August the same year, having earned a GED while incarcerated, and legally changed his name from Dias Actav to Bill K. Capri. Then came 2019, which produced a case that would define the legal chapter of his story at a national level. On May 11th of that year, federal and local officers arrested him at the Rolling Loud Music Festival in Miami, moments before he was set to perform in front of tens of thousands of people. The arrest grew out of an investigation into firearms purchases he made at a gun dealer in Hialeah, Florida in January and March of that year. He had falsely stated on federal ATF background check forms that he was not under felony indictment, when in reality, he was still under indictment in a South Carolina sexual assault case from 2016, which legally prohibited him from purchasing firearms. Across 2 separate transactions, he had acquired 3 weapons: a 9mm handgun, a .380 caliber handgun, and a semi-automatic mini Draco pistol. Authorities later connected one of those weapons to a shooting scene in Pompano Beach. Though Kodak was never charged in connection with that incident, he pleaded guilty to 2 federal counts of making false statements to acquire firearms in August 2019. In November that year, U.S. District Judge Federico Marino sentenced him to 46 months in federal prison. The judge's words from the sentencing have been quoted widely in coverage of Kodak's legal history, and they capture something specific about the pattern. He told the court that he normally gives young people a break for poor decisions, but that Kodak had been making those kinds of decisions since the age of 15. Kodak told the court he was not proud of the choices that had brought him there. In January 2021, President Donald Trump commuted the remainder of the federal sentence, an act Kodak referenced years later in conversation. That happened like you in a cell, and they Gemini gang. He Gemini like me. In 2022, 2 more arrests in Florida were added to the file. The first on New Year's Day involved a trespassing charge at a Pompano Beach housing complex, a charge that was dropped within 3 weeks with prosecutors declining to pursue it. The second in July came after Florida Highway Patrol stopped him for expired registration and tinted windows, then discovered 31 oxycodone pills and nearly $75,000 in cash inside his vehicle. Drug trafficking charges from that second arrest would linger into 2024, contributing to ongoing supervised release complications. The final arrest in the documented timeline came on December 7th, 2023. Officers in Plantation, Florida, found him asleep at the wheel of a black Bentley SUV parked in the roadway at 2 o'clock in the morning. There was a styrofoam cup smelling of alcohol in the door handle, rolling papers in the center console, and cannabis residue visible inside the vehicle. When the officer observed white powder falling from Kodak's mouth as he turned away, the situation escalated quickly. Kodak said the substance was percoate. Field tests suggested cocaine. He was arrested on cocaine possession, tampering with evidence, and a parking violation, and bonded out the same night. Subsequent lab analysis by the Broward Sheriff's Office Crime Lab confirmed the substance was oxycodone, for which Kodak held a valid prescription. The possession charge was dismissed in February 2024. The tampering charge followed in April. His attorney stated publicly that the case should never have been filed. The only thing that outlasted the state charges was a federal supervised release violation, triggered by the arrest itself, which resulted in roughly 2 months in federal custody before a judge released him to time served in late February 2024. Not one arrest in this entire documented timeline involves a jewelry store. Not one occurred in Houston, Texas. Not one grew from a dispute between Kodak Black and Johnny Dang, or any jeweler, or any jewelry transaction at any point in his documented legal history. The map of his actual arrests runs through Broward County, Miami-Dade, South Florida roadways, and federal court in the Southern District of Florida. It does not run through the front entrance of Johnny Dang and Company. That leaves only one question. What exactly is he arrested for destroying Johnny Dang's store claim? Where it came from, what evidence exists for it, and what that tells us about the way this particular story spread. What the record actually shows. Let's put the pieces together. There is no arrest record, no police report, no court filing, and no credible published report of any kind placing Kodak Black at the scene of any destruction of Johnny Dang's Houston store. The claim that he was arrested in connection with that act does not appear anywhere in his documented legal history. It does not appear in contemporaneous reporting from outlets that cover either Houston crime or Kodak Black's ongoing legal situations. It is not referenced in any statement from Kodak himself, from his legal team, from Johnny Dang's team, or from any law enforcement body that has ever had jurisdiction over either man. What it is, based on the full weight of available evidence from April 2026, is a downstream product of the same accelerating information environment that generated stories about FBI raids, federal arrests, and millions in jewelry fraud. The same batch of claims that Johnny Dang himself publicly identified as fake news implanted disinformation designed for clicks. The origin of the broader controversy traces clearly back to SWA's public accusations, which are the most substantive, most specific claims made by any named artist throughout this entire cycle. Sulka spoke from a position of documented history with the jeweler. He named a specific type of alleged fraud, lab-grown CVD diamonds being sold as natural VVS stones at natural diamond prices. He named a specific grievance, local, loyalty not being repaid, and he made a specific move switching jewelers publicly, expensively, and in a way designed to be noticed. Those were real specific acts from a real named person with a documented relationship to the subject. But the internet does not sit with that kind of specific bounded story. It accelerates it. It generalizes it. It takes one artist's documented complaint and builds around it a universe of unverified claims, each one slightly more dramatic than the one before it, each one needing slightly less evidence to be shared than the one it replaced. By the time the content cycle had turned over enough times, the raid stories and arrest allegations that Deng directly addressed had grown into a narrative almost entirely disconnected from the events Siswaka had originally described. The FBI story, the arrest story, the store destruction story. These were not the story. They were the story's echo, distorted past the point of recognition. Kodak's connection to all of it was in reality the thinnest thread in the web. His actual recorded interaction with Johnny Dang, removing a $50,000 multicolored diamond grill on Instagram Live and describing it as too bulky for his taste, was a stylistic complaint about a piece of custom jewelry that did not work out. He laughed during the live. He spoke about going back to gold. He made no accusation of fraud. He directed no threat at Deng. He raised no question about the authenticity of the diamonds. He did not demand a refund or post receipts or join a chorus of grievances. The clip that was reposted with captions about confrontations and scandals was never anything more in its original form than a man deciding that a piece of jewelry had been a miscalculation. The kind of decision anyone might make about a $50,000 purchase that turned out not to be what they imagined. The research on the actual relationship between Kodak and Deng is consistent. There is no evidence of any feud, any fraud accusation, any legal action, or any confrontation between them. What exists, documented across years of video content and public activity, is a standard high-profile client-jeweler relationship, mutually beneficial, photographed regularly, and absent of any real documented tension, until recycled clips were attached to a controversy that Kodak had no documented stake in. His silence on the Wider Sauce walk-led drama was not suspicious. It was the silence of someone who was not a party to the specific dispute being aired. What Kodak Black does have genuinely, verifiably, and in extensive detail is one of the most well-documented arrest records in contemporary hip-hop. He has faced real charges in real courtrooms on real dates. He has served time. He has had sentences commuted and charges dismissed. He has come back from legal situations that would have ended other careers and found a way to turn the narrative of his legal troubles into part of the story his music tells. The machinery of Broward County and the Southern District of Florida has processed his name more times than most, which is precisely why any new claim about a Kodak arrest should be traceable. And this one is not traceable because it did not happen. The title attached to this video belongs to a genre of content that has become one of the defining features of how stories about rap and celebrity travel online. A headline built on real relationships, real tensions, and real emotions stretched over a scaffolding of events that did not occur in the form described. The real story, a $50,000 grill that did not fit, a 20-plus year client relationship that exploded under the weight of fraud accusations, and a viral information cycle that collapsed every separate element into a single explosive narrative is compelling enough on its own. It does not need a fabricated arrest at the end. What actually connects Kodak Black and Johnny Dang is a years SL-long business relationship, at least one high profile, jewelry commission that did not survive first contact with an Instagram Live, and a broader cultural reckoning in hip-hop about what artists are actually buying when they write six-figure checks to jewelers whose work they cannot personally authenticate. That reckoning, driven primarily by Sauce Walker's accusations and the wider industry debate they ignited, is an ongoing story. Johnny Dang is still operating. The fraud allegations remain contested. The question of natural versus lab-grown diamonds in high-end hip-hop jewelry has not been resolved. And somewhere in South Florida, Kodak Black is wearing a simpler gold grill and telling this story the way he tells all his stories in the music. Love this video. Click on this card for more like that.